Hello and welcome. Last time we discussed the political discussion between the Ming and Hideyoshi's daimyo in Japan. Now we head back to Korea, where it's the eve of one of the most infamous battles in this conflict. I'm Stefan, and this is Japan at War. Before we begin, it should be noted that this is a very sensitive subject still for many Koreans, so please be mindful of that in the comments section. In a previous episode, we talked about the Japanese pulling back to Busan and setting up several fortifications. We also talked about how there had been many small skirmishes on the way there. Well, these small battles were actually still happening, despite the fact that the Ming and the Japanese had agreed to cease the fighting. The Koreans felt differently. If you'll remember, they hadn't agreed to peace and didn't feel like there was actually any place for it. This was their home after all, and they wanted revenge. So, anytime the Japanese sent out a hunting or foraging group, they risked being ambushed by the Korean government troops or of the civilian righteous armies. If the intention of these small attacks had been to disparage the Japanese, then it had failed and it actually had the opposite effect. Instead, it enraged them. Before July 20th came, the Japanese started to prepare to lay siege to the city of Jinju once again. If you'll remember back to episode 31, they had failed to take it. And even if you did forget, the Japanese certainly didn't. Not only were they still mad about the previous defeat, the recent attacks on their foraging groups had made them quite angry, and the poor people of Jinju were soon to be on the receiving end. They had also received fresh troops from Japan recently, which actually brought their numbers up to around 75,000, maybe even more. Now, despite all the anger and the fresh troops, there was actually still some concerns. The ceasefire was still ongoing between the Japanese and the Ming. Technically, the Koreans too, but that was just on paper. Anyways, this could be seen as them breaking this agreement, because, well, it was. Because of these concerns, Kato Kiyomasa, Asano Nagamasa, and Mori Katsunobu tried to persuade Shimazu Yoshihiro to build a fortification at the north of Jinju to cut off the Ming should they come to try and help out the defenders. But if that fort was made, the defender would pretty much be on their own until the rest of the attackers at Jinju were done with their assault. Essentially, they would be sacrificed. In any case, Shimazu refused, so the fort was never built. Shen Weijing, the Ming envoy/politician who was still in Busan, heard about the upcoming attack and tried desperately to get them to call it off. The samurai commanders there mostly ignored him, but not Konishi Yukinaga. Konishi had Shen leak the plans to the supreme commander of the Joseon forces, Kim Myung-won. Specifically, Kim was told that if the Koreans in the area would evacuate the city, well, the Japanese wouldn't attack. And even if they did this action was actually just revenge for the first battle. So the Koreans should just stay out of the area and let the Japanese have their face-saving revenge. And then they would be done. Shen stressed that this would not be a renewed offensive. Konishi Yukinaga, not having any love for Kato Kiyomasa, and the feeling was definitely mutual, told Shen Weijing that this attack was all Kato Kiyomasa's idea. And I have to admit, this might have actually been Konishi's way of getting the Ming to attack Kiyomasa. And while I have no way of proving this, it definitely wouldn't be out of character really for either of them. If you've watched this series from the beginning, you'll understand what I mean. Anyways, I'm assuming Shen Weijing wrote to the Ming as well because the Sichuan general, Liu Ting, wrote a letter addressed directly to Kato Kiyomasa, telling him that he was turning his back on the agreement that the Ming and the Japanese had come to, and asked him to reconsider the attack. Kato would send no reply. The supreme commander of the Korean forces, Kim Myung-won, realizing that there would actually indeed be an attack, issued out a call to arms to all Joseon government troops and all civilian righteous armies to gather around the city to defend it to the last man. He then went to General Liu Ting asking him to lead the attack, but the Sichuan general declined both because of the treaty and because he needed the command of his superiors to move. Kim acknowledged this and then sought out help from Supreme Commander Li Rusong and his superior, Song Yin-chang. But they refused, as they didn't want to risk the negotiations that were still taking place. Due to a perceived ineffectiveness that he had as Supreme Commander of the Korean forces, King Sonjo actually fired Kim from his position at this time and installed Guan Yul as the new Supreme Commander. Kim, though, had already issued the orders for the armies to start to gather towards Jinju. Guan Yul would then actually issue his own orders to mobilize the Joseon army from Jeolla province to reinforce Jinju. And during this time, the Japanese would actually begin their attack. But we'll talk about that in the next episode. Please remember to like the video. I know this is a short one, but trust me, the next video, that is not going to be a short episode at all. I'll see you next time.